Sierra Leone.
Sierra Leone, officially the Republic of Sierra Leone, is a country in West Africa that is bordered by Guinea to the northeast, Liberia to the southeast, and the Atlantic Ocean to the southwest. Sierra Leone is a constitutional republic with a directly elected president and a unicameral legislature. The country has a tropical climate, with a diverse environment ranging from savanna to rainforests. The country covers a total area of 71,740 kilometers and with an estimated population of 6 million. Sierra Leone is divided into 4 administrative regions: the Northern Province, Eastern Province, Southern Province and the Western Area, which are subdivided into 14 districts. Each district has its own directly elected local government known as District Council, headed by a council chairman, in whom local executive authority is vested. Freetown is Sierra Leone's capital, its largest city as well as its economic, commercial and political center. Bo is Sierra Leone's second largest city and second major economic center. Since independence to present, Sierra Leone's politics has been dominated by 2 major political parties, the Sierra Leone People's Party, SLPP, and the All People's Congress, APC. The population of Sierra Leone is comprised of about 16 ethnic groups, each with its own language and custom. The 2 largest and most influential are the Tem and the Mende. The Tem are predominantly found in the north of the country, while the Mende are predominant in the southeast. Sierra Leone is a predominantly Muslim country, though with an influential Christian minority. Sierra Leone is regarded as one of the most religiously tolerant countries in the world. Muslims and Christians collaborate and interact with each other peacefully in the country. Religious violence is very rare in Sierra Leone. Although English is the language of instruction in schools and the official language in government administration, the Creole language, derived from English and several indigenous African languages, is the primary language of communication among Sierra Leone's different ethnic groups, and is spoken by 90% of the country's population. The Creole language serves to unite the different ethnic groups, especially in their trade and daily interaction with each other. Sierra Leone has relied on mining, especially diamonds, for its economic base. It is also among the largest producers of titanium and bauxite, a major producer of gold, and is one of the world's largest deposits of rutile. Sierra Leone is home to the 3rd largest natural harbor in the world. Despite exploitation of this natural wealth, 70% of his people live in poverty. In 1462, the Portuguese explorer Pedro de Sintra visited this area, naming it Serra Leão, meaning Lioness Mountains, for the landscape around Freetown. Posts in Sierra Leone were developed as centers of the Atlantic slave trade, and hundreds of thousands of Africans were transported from the interior to the Americas through trading posts in Sierra Leone. In the late 18th century, the British Crown established a colony at Freetown, for resettlements of freed slaves. About 1,200 black loyalists were resettled from Nova Scotia on March 11, 1792. They were mostly African Americans from the former colonies, now the United States. Slaves liberated from illegal trade in the early 19th century joined them, and they developed the Creole people and language. In 1808, Freetown became a British Crown colony. In 1896, Britain annexed the interior of the country as a British protectorate, changing its relations with the paramount chiefs. The united country achieved independence in 1961. Competition among rival groups finally opened into the Sierra Leone Civil War, 1991 to 2002, which over more than a decade devastated the country. It left more than 50,000 people dead, much of the country's infrastructure destroyed, and over 2 million people displaced as refugees in neighboring countries.
History. Early history.
Archaeological finds show that Sierra Leone has been inhabited continuously for at least 2,500 years, populated by successive cultures of peoples who migrated from other parts of Africa. The people adopted the use of iron by the 9th century, and by 1000 AD agriculture was being practiced by coastal tribes. The climate changed considerably during that time, and boundaries among different ecological zones changed as well, affecting migration and conquest. Sierra Leone's dense tropical rainforest and swampy environment was considered impenetrable. It was also host to the tsetse fly, which carried disease fatal to horses and zebu cattle used by the Man people. This environmental factor protected its peoples from conquest by the Man and other African empires. This also reduced the Islamic influence of the Mali Empire. But, the Islamic faith, introduced by Siasu traders, merchants and migrants from the north and east, became widely adopted in the 18th century.
European traders.
European contacts within Sierra Leone were among the first in West Africa. In 1462, Portuguese explorer Pedro de Sintra mapped the hills surrounding what is now Freetown Harbour, naming the shaped formation Serra de Lai, Portuguese for Lioness Mountains. The Italian rendering of this geographic formation is Sierra Leone, which later was used as the country's name. Soon after, Portuguese traders arrived at the harbour. By 1495 they had built a fortified trading post. The Dutch and French also set up trade here, and each nation used Sierra Leone as a trading point for slaves brought by African traders from interior areas. In 1562, the English initiated the Triangle trade when Sir John Hawkins transported 300 enslaved Africans, acquired by the sword and partly by other means, to the Spanish colony of Santo Domingo in the Caribbean, where he sold them.
Early colonies.
Following the American Revolutionary War, the British had evacuated thousands of freed African American slaves and resettled them in Canadian and Caribbean colonies and London. Many struggled in their new lives. In 1787 the British Crown founded a settlement in Sierra Leone in what was called the Province of Freedom. It intended to resettle some of the black poor of London, mostly African Americans freed by the British during the war. About 400 blacks and 60 whites reached Sierra Leone on May 15, 1787. The group also included some West Indian, African and East Asian people from London. After they established Granville Town, most of the first group of colonists died, due to disease and warfare with the indigenous African peoples, Tem and Mende, who resisted their encroachment. The 64 remaining colonists established a second Granville Town. Following the Revolution, more than 3,000 black loyalists had also been settled in Nova Scotia, where they were finally granted land. They founded Birchtown, Nova Scotia, but faced harsh winters and racial discrimination in the colony. Thomas Peters pressed British authorities for relief and more aid. Together with British abolitionist John Clarkson, the Sierra Leone Company was established to relocate black loyalists who wanted to take their chances in West Africa. In 1792 nearly 1,200 persons from Nova Scotia crossed the Atlantic to build the second, and only permanent, colony of Sierra Leone and the settlement of Freetown on March 11, 1792. In Sierra Leone they were called the Nova Scotian settlers, the Nova Scotians, or the settlers. The settlers built Freetown in the styles they knew from their lives in the American South. They also continued American fashion and American manners. In addition, many continued to practice Methodism in Freetown. The initial process of society building in Freetown, however, was a harsh struggle. The Crown did not supply enough basic supplies and provisions, and the settlers were continually threatened by illegal slave trading and the risk of re-enslavement. In the 1790s, the settlers, including adult women, voted for the first time in elections. The Sierra Leone Company, controlled by London investors, refused to allow the settlers to take freehold of the land. In 1799 some of the settlers revolted. The Crown subdued the revolt by bringing in forces of more than 500 Jamaican Maroon people, whom they transported from Trelawney Town via Nova Scotia in 1800. On January 1, 1808, Thomas Ludlam, the governor of the Sierra Leone Company and a leading abolitionist, surrendered the company's charter. This ended its 16 years of running the colony. The British Crown reorganized the Sierra Leone Company as the African Institution. It was directed to improve the local economy. Its members represented both British who hoped to inspire local entrepreneurs and those with interest in the Macaulay and Babington Company, which held the British monopoly on Sierra Leone trade. Beginning in 1808, following the abolition of the slave trade in 1807, British crews delivered thousands of formerly enslaved Africans to Freetown, after liberating them from illegal slave ships. Most of these liberated Africans or captives chose to remain in Sierra Leone. Cut off from their various homelands and traditions, the liberated Africans assimilated the Western styles of settlers and Maroons. They built a flourishing trade in flowers and beads on the West African coast. These returned Africans were from many areas of Africa, but principally the West Coast. During the 19th century, freed Black Americans, some Americo-Liberian refugees, and particularly West Indians, also immigrated and settled in Freetown. Together these peoples created a new Creole ethnicity called the Creole people, initially called Creoles, and a trading language, Creole, which became commonly used among many of the ethnicities in the country.
Colonial era.
In the early 19th century, Freetown served as the residence of the British colonial governor of the region, who also ministered over the Gold Coast, now Ghana, and the Gambia settlements. Sierra Leone developed as the educational centre of British West Africa. The British established Fura Bay College here in 1827, which rapidly became a magnet for English-speaking Africans on the West Coast. For more than a century, it was the only European-style university in Western Sub-Saharan Africa. The British interacted mostly with the Creoles in Freetown. They did most of the trading with the indigenous peoples of the interior. In addition, educated Creoles held numerous positions in the colonial government, giving them status and good-paying positions. Following the Berlin Conference of 1884–1885, the UK decided that it needed to establish more dominion over the inland areas, in order to satisfy what was described by the European powers as effective occupation of territories. In 1896 it annexed these areas, declaring them the Sierra Leone Protectorate. With this change, the British began to expand their administration in the region, recruiting British citizens to posts, and pushing Creoles out of positions in government and even the desirable residential areas in Freetown. In addition, the British annexation of the Protectorate interfered with the sovereignty of indigenous chiefs. They designated chiefs as units of local government, rather than dealing with them individually as had been previous practice. They did not maintain relationships even with longtime allies, such as Bibiri, chief of Kassi, a community on the small Scarces River. He was later unfairly portrayed as a prime instigator of the Hut Tax War in 1898. Colonel Frederick Cardew, military governor of the Protectorate, in 1898 established a new tax on dwellings and demanded that the chiefs use their peoples to maintain roads. The taxes were often higher than the value of the dwellings, and 24 chiefs signed a petition to Cardew, telling how destructive this was. Their people could not afford to take time off from their subsistence agriculture. They resisted payment of taxes. Tensions over the new colonial requirements, and administration suspicions about the chiefs, led to the Hut Tax War of 1898, also called the 10-Mend War. The British fired first. The northern front of majority 10 people was led by Bibiri. The southern front, consisting mostly of men people, entered conflict somewhat later and for different reasons. For several months, Bibiri's fighters had the advantage over the vastly more powerful British forces. Both the British troops and Bibiri's warriors suffered hundreds of fatalities each. Bibiri finally surrendered on November 11, 1898 to end the destruction of his people's territory and dwellings. Although the British government recommended leniency, Cardew insisted on sending the chief and 2 allies into exile in the Gold Coast. His government hanged 96 of the chief's warriors. Bibiri was allowed to return in 1905, when he resumed his chieftaincy of Kassi. The defeat of the Tem and Mend in the Hut Tax War ended large-scale organized resistance to the Protectorate and colonial government. But, resistance continued throughout the colonial period in the form of intermittent, wide-scale rioting and chaotic labor disturbances. For instance, riots in 1955 and 1956 involved many tens of thousands of natives in the Protectorate. Domestic slavery, which continued to be practiced by local African elites, was abolished in 1928. One notable event in 1935 was the granting of a monopoly on mineral mining to the Sierra Leone Selection Trust, run by De Beers. The monopoly was scheduled to last 98 years. Mining of diamonds in the east and other minerals expanded, drawing laborers there from other parts of the country. In 1924, the UK government divided Sierra Leone into a colony and a protectorate, with separate and different political systems constitutionally defined for each. The colony was Freetown and its coastal area. The protectorate was defined as inland areas dominated by tribal chiefs. Antagonism between the two entities escalated to a heated debate in 1947, when proposals were introduced to provide for a single political system for both the colony and the protectorate. Most of the proposals come from leaders of the protectorate, whose population far outnumbered that in the colony. The Creoles, led by Isaac Wallace Johnson, opposed the proposals, as they would have resulted in reducing the political power of the Creoles in the colony. Due to the astute politics of Sir Milton Margai, an ethnic Mende leader, the educated protectorate elite was won over to join forces with the paramount chiefs in the face of Creole intransigence. Later, Sir Milton used the same skills to win over opposition leaders and moderate Creole elements in order to achieve independence from the UK. In November 1951, Margai oversaw the drafting of a new constitution, which united the separate colonial and protectorate legislatures and, most importantly, provided a framework for decolonization. In 1953, Sierra Leone was granted local ministerial powers, and Sir Milton Margai was elected Chief Minister of Sierra Leone. The new constitution ensured Sierra Leone a parliamentary system within the Commonwealth of Nations. In May 1957, Sierra Leone held its first parliamentary election. The Sierra Leone People's Party, SLPP, which was then the most popular political party in the colony of Sierra Leone, won the most seats in parliament. Margai was re-elected as chief minister by a landslide.
1960 Independence Conference.
On April 20, 1960, Sir Milton Margai led the 24 members of the Sierra Leonean delegation at the constitutional conferences that were held with Queen Elizabeth II and British Colonial Secretary Ian MacLeod in the negotiations for independence held at the Lancaster House in London. All of the 24 members of the Sierra Leonean delegation were prominent and well-respected politicians, including Sir Milton himself, his younger brother lawyer Sir Albert Margai, outspoken trade unionist Siaka Stevens, SLPP strongman Lamina Sanko, outspoken Creole activist Isaac Wallace Johnson, Dr. John Carifa Smart, Paramount Chief and first female Member of Parliament Ella Koblo Gulama, educationist Muhammad Sanusi Mustafa, Creole-dominated UPP party leader Cyril Rogers Wright, Professor Kan Puri, lawyer Sabanja Tejan Sai, Creole diplomat Edward Wilmot Blyden III, educationist Amadari, Paramount Chief Tamba Songum Briwa, former Mayor of Freetown Eustace Henry Taylor Cummings, second female Member of Parliament and women's rights activist Constance Cummings John, Creole-dominated UPP Party National Chairman Columbus Thompson and Creole diplomat Hector Reginald Sylvanus Boltman. On the conclusion of talks in London on May 4, 1960, the United Kingdom agreed to grant Sierra Leone independence on April 27, 1961. Siaka Stevens, a trade unionist, refused to sign Sierra Leone's Declaration of Independence, saying there had been a secret defense pact between Sierra Leone and Britain. He also contended that the Sierra Leonean government had agreed not to hold elections before independence, which would effectively shut him out of Sierra Leone's political process. The delegates received a hero's welcome on their return to Freetown. For his criticisms, Stevens was promptly expelled from the People's National Party, PNP. On September 24, 1960, Stevens formed an alliance with several prominent northern politicians including Christian Aluzi and Kamara Taylor, Surrey Ibrahim Koroma, Muhammad Bash Taki, Mukhtar Kale, Kausu Conti and Alia Badarako Roma to form their own political party, called the All People's Congress, APC, in opposition of the SLPP government. Stevens took advantage of the dissatisfaction with the ruling SLPP among some prominent politicians from the northern part of Sierra Leone to form the APC. And Stevens used the northern part of Sierra Leone as his political base.
Independence.
On April 27, 1961, Sir Milton Margai led Sierra Leone to independence from Great Britain and became the country's first Prime Minister. Thousands of Sierra Leoneans took to the street in celebration. Sierra Leone retained a parliamentary system of government and was a member of the Commonwealth of Nations. The leader of the main opposition APC, Siaka Stevens, along with Isaac Wallace Johnson, another outspoken critic of the SLPP government, were arrested and placed under house arrest in Freetown, along with 16 others charged with disrupting the independence celebration. In May 1962, Sierra Leone held its first general election as an independent nation. The Sierra Leone People's Party, SLPP, won a plurality of seats in parliament, and Sir Milton Margai was re-elected as Prime Minister. Sir Milton was known for his self-effacement. He was neither corrupt nor did he make a lavish display of his power or status. He based the government on the rule of law and the separation of powers, with multi-party political institutions and fairly viable representative structures. Margai used his conservative ideology to lead Sierra Leone without much strife. He appointed government officials to represent various ethnic groups. Margai employed a brokerage style of politics, by sharing political power among political parties and interest groups, as well as the paramount chiefs in the provinces.
Albert Margai.
Upon Sir Milton's unexpected death in 1964, his half-brother, Sir Albert Margai, was appointed as Prime Minister by Parliament. Sir Albert's leadership was briefly challenged by Sierra Leone's Foreign Minister John Carafa Smart, who questioned Sir Albert's succession to the SLPP leadership position. Carafa Smart received little support in Parliament in his attempt to have Margai stripped of the SLPP leadership. Soon after Margai was sworn in as Prime Minister, he immediately dismissed several senior government officials who had served under his elder brother Sir Milton's government, as he viewed them as a threat to his administration. Sir Albert resorted to increasingly authoritarian actions in response to protests and enacted several laws against the opposition All People's Congress, APC, whilst attempting to establish a single-party state. Sir Albert was opposed to the colonial legacy of allowing executive powers to the paramount chiefs, many of whom had been key allies of his late brother Sir Milton. Accordingly, they began to consider Sir Albert as a threat to the ruling houses across the country. In 1967, riots broke out in Freetown against Sir Albert's policies. In response, Margai declared a state of emergency across the country. Sir Albert was accused of corruption and of a policy of affirmative action in favour of his own Mende ethnic group. Although Sir Albert had the full backing of the country's security forces, he called for free and fair elections.
3 military coups, 1967 to 1968.
The APC, with its leader Siaka Stevens, narrowly won a small majority of seats in Parliament over the SLPP in a closely contested 1967 Sierra Leone general election. Stevens was sworn in as Prime Minister on March 21, 1967. Within hours after taking office, Stevens was ousted in a bloodless military coup led by Brigadier General David Lanzana, the commander of the Sierra Leone Armed Forces. He was a close ally of Sir Albert Margai, who had appointed him to the position in 1964. Brigadier Lanzana placed Stevens under house arrest in Freetown and insisted that the determination of the Prime Minister should await the election of the tribal representatives to the House. On March 23, 1967, a group of senior military officers in the Sierra Leone Army, led by Brigadier General Andrew Jukson Smith, overrode this action by a coup d'état. They seized control of the government, arresting Brigadier Lanzana, and suspending the constitution. The group set up the National Reformation Council, NRC, with Brigadier Andrew Jukes Smith as its chairman and head of state of the country. On April 18, 1968, the Anti-Corruption Revolutionary Movement, ACRM, a group of senior military officers led by Brigadier General John Ahmad Bangura, overthrew the NRC junta. The ACRM junta arrested many senior NRC members. They reinstated the constitution and returned power to Stevens, who at last assumed the office of Prime Minister.
One-party state.
Stevens assumed power again in 1968 with a great deal of hope and ambition. Much trust was placed upon him as he championed multi-party politics. Stevens had campaigned on a platform of bringing the tribes together under socialist principles. During his first decade or so in power, Stevens renegotiated some of what he called useless pre-financed schemes contracted by his predecessors, both Albert Margai of the SLPP and Jukes Smith of the NRC. Some of these policies by the SLPP and the NRC were said to have left the country in an economically deprived state. Stevens reorganized the country's refinery, the government-owned Cape Sierra Hotel, and a cement factory. He cancelled Jukes Smith's construction of a church and mosque on the grounds of Victoria Park. Stevens began efforts that would later bridge the distance between the provinces and the city. Roads and hospitals were constructed in the provinces, and paramount chiefs and provincial peoples became a prominent force in Freetown. Under pressure of several coup attempts, real and perceived, Stevens' rule grew more and more authoritarian, and his relationship with some of his ardent supporters deteriorated. He removed the SLPP party from competitive politics in general elections, some believed, through the use of violence and intimidation. To maintain the support of the military, Stevens retained the popular John Ahmad Bangura as the head of the Sierra Leone Armed Forces. After the return to civilian rule, by-elections were held, beginning in autumn 1968, and an all-APC cabinet was appointed. Calm was not completely restored. In November 1968, unrest in the provinces led Stevens to declare a state of emergency across the country. Many senior officers in the Sierra Leone Army were greatly disappointed with Stevens' policies. But none could confront Stevens. Brigadier General Bangura, who had reinstated Stevens as Prime Minister, was widely considered the only person who could put the brakes on Stevens. The army was devoted to Bangura, and it was believed, in some quarters, that this made him potentially dangerous to Stevens. In January 1970, Bangura was arrested and charged with conspiracy and plotting to commit a coup against the Stevens government. After a trial that lasted a few months, Bangura was convicted and sentenced to death. On March 29, 1970, Brigadier Bangura was executed by hanging in Freetown. In a surprising move, Stevens later named a young junior officer Joseph Saidu Momo as the commander of the Sierra Leone military. On March 23, 1971, a group of soldiers loyal to the executed Brigadier Bangura held a mutiny in the capital Freetown and in some other parts of the country in opposition of Stevens' government. Several soldiers were arrested for their involvement in the mutiny, including Corporal Fode Sanko, who was convicted and jailed for 7 years at Freetown's Pademba Road prison. In April 1971, a new Republican constitution was adopted under which Stevens became president. In the 1972 by-elections, the opposition SLPP complained of intimidation and procedural obstruction by the APC and militia. These problems became so severe that the SLPP boycotted the 1973 general election. As a result, the APC won 84 of the 85 elected seats. An alleged plot to overthrow President Stevens failed in 1974 and its leaders were executed. In March 1976, Stevens was elected without opposition for a second 5-year term as president. On July 19, 1975, 14 senior army and government officials including Brigadier David Lanzana, former cabinet minister Mohammed Sari Fauna, father of writer Aminata Fauna, Brigadier General Ibrahim Bashtaki and Lieutenant Habib Lanzana Kamara were executed after being convicted for allegedly attempting a coup to topple President Stevens' government. In 1977, A nationwide student demonstration against the government disrupted Sierra Leone politics. However, the demonstration was quickly put down by the army and Stevens' own personal Special Security Division, SSD, force, a heavily armed paramilitary force he had created to protect him and to maintain his hold on power. The SSD officers were very loyal to Stevens and were deployed across Sierra Leone to put down any rebellion against Stevens' government. General election was called later that year in which corruption was again endemic. The APC won 74 seats and the SLPP 15. In 1978, the APC-dominant parliament approved a new constitution making the country a one-party state. The 1978 constitution made the APC the only legal political party in Sierra Leone. This move led to another major demonstration against the government in many parts of the country, but again it was put down by the army and Stevens' SSD forces. Stevens is generally criticized for dictatorial methods and government corruption, but on a positive note, he reduced ethnic polarization in government by incorporating members of various ethnic groups into his all-dominant APC government. Siaka Stevens retired from politics in November 1985 after being in power for 18 years. The APC named a new presidential candidate to succeed Stevens at their last delegate conference held in Freetown in November 1985. He was Major General Joseph Saidu Momoh, the commander of the Republic of Sierra Leone Armed Forces, and Stevens' own choice to succeed him. As head of the Sierra Leone Armed Forces, Major General Momoh was very loyal to Stevens, who had appointed him to the position. Like Stevens, Momoh was also a member of the minority Limba ethnic group. Momoh was elected president as the only contesting candidate and was sworn in as Sierra Leone's second president on November 28, 1985 in Freetown. A one-party parliamentary election between APC members was held in May 1986. President Momoh's strong links with the army and his verbal attacks on corruption earned him much-needed initial support among Sierra Leoneans. With the lack of new faces in the new APC cabinet under President Momoh and the return of many of the old faces from Stevens' government, criticism soon arose that Momoh was simply perpetuating the rule of Stevens. The next couple of years under the Momoh administration were characterized by corruption, which Momoh diffused by sacking several senior cabinet ministers. To formalize his war against corruption, President Momoh announced a code of conduct for political leaders and public servants. After an alleged attempt to overthrow President Momoh in March 1987, more than 60 senior government officials were arrested, including Vice President Francis Minor, who was removed from office, convicted for plotting the coup, and executed by hanging in 1989 along with 5 others.
Multi-Party Constitution and Revolutionary United Front Rebellion 1991–2001.
In October 1990, due to mounting pressure from both within and outside the country for political and economic reform, President Momoh set up a Constitutional Review Commission to assess the 1978 one-party constitution. Based on the Commission's recommendations, a constitution re-establishing a multi-party system was approved by the exclusive APC Parliament by a 60% majority vote, becoming effective on October 1, 1991. There was great suspicion that President Momoh was not serious about his promise of political reform, as APC rule continued to be increasingly marked by abuses of power. The brutal civil war that was going on in neighboring Liberia played a significant role in the outbreak of fighting in Sierra Leone. Charles Taylor, then leader of the National Patriotic Front of Liberia, reportedly helped form the Revolutionary United Front, RUF, under the command of former Sierra Leonean Army Corporal Fode Sabana Sanko, an ethnic Tem from Tonkololai district in northern Sierra Leone. Sanko was a British-trained former army corporal who had also undergone guerrilla training in Libya. Taylor's aim was for the RUF to attack the bases of Nigerian-dominated peacekeeping troops in Sierra Leone who were opposed to his rebel movement in Liberia. On April 29, 1992, a 25-year-old Captain Valentine Strasser, an ethnic Creole, led his fellow 6 junior officers in the Sierra Leone Army, all in their mid to late 20s, Lieutenant Zar Sandi, Sergeant Solomon Musa, Captain Komba Mondi, Lieutenant Tom Numa, Captain Julius Moore Adebayo and Captain Comba Cambo that launched a military coup, which sent President Momo into exile in Guinea, and the young soldiers established the National Provisional Ruling Council, NPRC, with Strasser as its chairman and head of state of the country. And Sergeant Solomon Musa, a childhood friend of Strasser, became the deputy chairman and deputy leader of the NPRC junta government. Strasser became the world's youngest head of state when he seized power just 3 days after his 25th birthday. The NPRC junta established the National Supreme Council of State as the military highest command and final authority in all matters, and was exclusively made up of the highest-ranking NPRC soldiers, included Strasser himself and the original soldiers who toppled President Momo. Senior NPRC commander Lieutenant Czar Sandy, a trusted ally of Strasser, was assassinated, allegedly by Major Sim Turi, a key loyalist of ousted President Momo. Sandy's funeral in Freetown was attended by many high-ranking soldiers of the NPRC junta, included Strasser himself. A heavily armed military manhunt took place across the country to find Lieutenant Sandy's killer, but the main suspect Major Sim Turi went into hiding and fled the country to Guinea, fearing for his life. However, dozens of soldiers loyal to the ousted President Momo were arrested. The NPRC junta immediately suspended the constitution, banned all political parties, limited freedom of speech and freedom of the press and enacted a rule-by-decree policy, in which soldiers were granted unlimited powers of administrative detention without charge or trial, and challenges against such detentions in court were precluded. The NPRC junta maintained relations with the Economic Community of West African States, ECOWAS, and strengthened support for Sierra Leone-based ECOMOG troops fighting in Liberia. In December 1992, an alleged coup attempt against the NPRC administration of Strasser, aimed at freeing the detained Colonel Yahya Kanu, Colonel Kahota Ms. Doumbouya and former Inspector General of Police Bambay Kamara was foiled. Sergeant Mohammed Lamin Bangara, and some junior army officers were identified as being behind the coup plot. The coup plot led to the execution of 17 soldiers, including Sergeant Mohammed Lamin Bangara, Colonel Yahya Kanu and Lieutenant Colonel Kahota Ms. Doumbouya. Several prominent members of the Momo government who had been in detention at the Pardemba Road prison, including former Inspector General of Police Bambay Kamara, were also executed. On July 5, 1994, the deputy NPRC leader Sergeant Solomon Musa, who was very popular with the general population, particularly in Freetown, was arrested and sent into exile after he was accused of planning a coup to topple Strasser. An accusation Sergeant Musa denied. Strasser replaced Musa as deputy NPRC chairman with Captain Julius Moore Adebayo, who was instantly promoted by Strasser to brigadier. The NPRC proved to be nearly as ineffectual as the Momo-led APC government in repelling the RUF. More and more of the country fell to RUF fighters, and by 1994 they held much of the diamond-rich Eastern Province and were at the edge of Freetown. In response, the NPRC hired several hundred mercenaries from the private firm Executive Outcomes. Within a month they had driven RUF fighters back to enclaves along Sierra Leone's borders, and cleared the RUF from the Kono diamond-producing areas of Sierra Leone. With Strasser's two most senior NPRC allies and commanders Lieutenant Czar Sandy and Lieutenant Solomon Musa no longer around to defend him, Strasser's leadership within the NPRC Supreme Council of State was not considered much stronger. On January 16, 1996, after about 4 years in power, Strasser was handcuffed and arrested in a palace coup at the defense headquarters in Freetown by his fellow NPRC soldiers, led by his deputy brigadier Julius Moore Adebayo and backed by many high-ranking members of the NPRC junta. Supreme Council included Lieutenant Colonel Tom Numa, Lieutenant Colonel Comba Mondi, Lieutenant Colonel Reginald Glover, Lieutenant Colonel Idris Kamara, Lieutenant Colonel Carafa Kargbo and Captain Patrick Koiga Romero, who was the head of Strasser's military bodyguards. Strasser was immediately flown into exile in a military helicopter to Conakry, Guinea. In his first public broadcast to the nation following the 1996 coup, Brigadier Bio stated that his support for returning Sierra Leone to a democratically elected civilian government and his commitment to ending the civil war were his motivations for the coup. Promises of a return to civilian rule were fulfilled by Bio, who handed power over to Ahmad Tejan Kabar, of the Sierra Leone People's Party, SLPP, after the conclusion of elections in early 1996. President Kabar took power with a great promise of ending the civil war. President Kabar opened dialogue with the AUF and invited AUF leader Foday Sanko for peace negotiations. On May 25, 1997, 17 soldiers in the Sierra Leone Army led by Corporal Tambak Bori, loyal to the detained Major General Johnny Paul Koroma, launched a military coup which sent President Kabar into exile in Guinea, and they established the Armed Forces Revolutionary Council, AFRC. Corporal Gbori quickly went to the SLBSFM 99.9 headquarters in Freetown to announce the coup to a shocked nation and to alert all soldiers across the country to report for guard duty. The soldiers immediately released Koroma from prison and installed him as their chairman and head of state. Koroma suspended the constitution, banned demonstrations, shut down all private radio stations in the country and invited the AUF to join the new junta government, with its leader Foday Sanko as the vice-chairman of the new AFRC-AUF coalition junta government. Within days, Freetown was overwhelmed by the presence of the AUF combatants who came to the city in their thousands. The Kamojas, a group of traditional fighters mostly from the Mende ethnic group under the command of Deputy Defense Minister Samuel Hinga Norman, remained loyal to President Kabar and defended the southern part of Sierra Leone from the soldiers.
Kabar's government and the end of civil war.
After 10 months in office, the junta was overthrown by the Nigeria-led ECOMOG forces, and the democratically elected government of President Kabar was reinstated in March 1998. On October 12, 1998, 25 soldiers in the Sierra Leone Army, including Corporal Tambak Bori, Brigadier Hussam Karim Kanti, Colonel Abdul Karim Sasse and Major Kula Samba were executed after they were convicted at a court-martial in Freetown for orchestrating the 1997 coup that overthrew President Kabar. In October 1999, the United Nations agreed to send peacekeepers to help restore order and disarm the rebels. The first of the 6,000-member force began arriving in December, and the UN Security Council voted in February 2000 to increase the force to 11,000, and later to 13,000. But in May, when nearly all Nigerian forces had left and UN forces were trying to disarm the AUF in eastern Sierra Leone, Sanko's forces clashed with the UN troops, and some 500 peacekeepers were taken hostage as the peace accord effectively collapsed. The hostage crisis resulted in more fighting between the AUF and the government as UN troops launched Operation Kyokri to end the siege. The operation was successful with Indian and British special forces being the main contingents. The situation in the country deteriorated to such an extent that British troops were deployed in Operation Paliza, originally simply to evacuate foreign nationals. However, the British exceeded their original mandate, and took full military action to finally defeat the rebels and restore order. The British were the catalyst for the ceasefire that ended the Civil War. Elements of the British Army, together with administrators and politicians, remain in Sierra Leone to this day, helping train the armed forces, improve the infrastructure of the country and administer financial and material aid. Tony Blair, the Prime Minister of Britain at the time of the British intervention, is regarded as a hero by the people of Sierra Leone, many of whom are keen for more British involvement. Sierra Leoneans have been described as the world's most resilient people. Between 1991 and 2001, about 50,000 people were killed in Sierra Leone's civil war. Hundreds of thousands of people were forced from their homes and many became refugees in Guinea and Liberia. In 2001, UN forces moved into rebel-held areas and began to disarm rebel soldiers. By January 2002, the war was declared over. In May 2002, Kabar was re-elected president by a landslide. By 2004, the disarmament process was complete. Also in 2004, a UN-backed war crimes court began holding trials of senior leaders from both sides of the war. In December 2005, UN peacekeeping forces pulled out of Sierra Leone. In August 2007, Sierra Leone held presidential and parliamentary elections. However, no presidential candidate won the 50% plus one vote majority stipulated in the constitution on the first round of voting. A runoff election was held in September 2007, and Ernest Bai Koroma, the candidate of the main opposition APC, was elected president. Koroma was re-elected president for a second, and final, term in November 2012.
Geography and climate.
Sierra Leone is located on the west coast of Africa, lying mostly between latitudes 7 deg and 10 degn. A small area is south of 7 deg, and longitudes 10 deg and 14 degw. The country is bordered by Guinea to the north and northeast, Liberia to the south and southeast, and the Atlantic Ocean to the west. Sierra Leone has a total area of 71,740 kilometers (2, 27,699 square miles), divided into a land area of 71,620 kilometers (2, 27,653 square miles), and water of 120 kilometers (2, 46 square miles. The country has 4 distinct geographical regions. In eastern Sierra Leone the plateau is interspersed with high mountains, where Mount Bintumani reaches 1,948 m, 6,391 feet, the highest point in the country. The upper part of the drainage basin of the Mo River is located in the south of this region. The center of the country is a region of lowland plains, containing forests, bush and farmland, that occupies about 43% of Sierra Leone's land area. The northern section of this has been categorized by the World Wildlife Fund as part of the Guianean Forest Savanna Mosaic ecoregion, while the south is rain-forested plains and farmland. In the west Sierra Leone has some 400 kilometers, 249 miles, of Atlantic coastline, giving it both bountiful marine resources and attractive tourist potential. The coast has areas of low-lying Guianean mangroves swamp. The national capital Freetown sits on a coastal peninsula, situated next to the Sierra Leone Harbour, the world's third-largest natural harbour. The climate is tropical, with 2 seasons determining the agricultural cycle, the rainy season from May to November, and a dry season from December to May, which includes Harmattan, when cool, dry winds blow in off the Sahara Desert and the nighttime temperature can be as low as 16 degc, 60.8 degf. The average temperature is 26 degc, 78.8 degf, and varies from around 26 to 36 degc, 78.8 to 96.8 degf, during the year.
Environment.
Human activities claimed to be responsible or contributing to land degradation in Sierra Leone include unsustainable agricultural land use, poor soil and water management practices, deforestation, removal of natural vegetation, fillwood consumption and to a lesser extent overgrazing and urbanization. Deforestation, both for commercial timber and to make room for agriculture, is the major concern and represents an enormous loss of natural economic wealth to the nation. Mining and slash-and-burn for land conversion, such as cattle grazing, dramatically diminished forested land in Sierra Leone since the 1980s. It is listed among countries of concern for emissions, as having low forest cover with high rates of deforestation, LFHD. There are concerns that heavy logging continues in the Tama-Tonkali Forest Reserve in the north. They have extended their operations to Nimani, Kono District, Eastern Province. Jui, Western Rural District, Western Area. Loma Mountains National Park, Koinadugu, Northern Province. And with plans to start operations in the Kambui Forest Reserve in the Kenema District, Eastern Province. Habitat degradation for the African wild dog, Lichen pictus, has been decreased, such that this canid is deemed to have been extirpated in Sierra Leone. Until 2002, Sierra Leone lacked a forest management system due to the civil war that caused tens of thousands of deaths. Deforestation rates have increased 7.3% since the end of the civil war. On paper, 55 protected areas covered 4.5% of Sierra Leone as of 2003. The country has 2,019 known species of higher plants, 147 mammals, 626 birds, 67 reptiles, 35 amphibians, and 99 fish species. The Environmental Justice Foundation has documented how the number of illegal fishing vessels in Sierra Leone's waters has multiplied in recent years. The amount of illegal fishing has significantly depleted fish stocks, depriving local fishing communities of an important resource for survival. The situation is particularly serious as fishing provides the only source of income for many communities in a country still recovering from over a decade of civil war. In June 2005, the Royal Society for the Protection of Birds, RSPB, and BirdLife International agreed to support a conservation sustainable development project in the Gola Forest in southeastern Sierra Leone, an important surviving fragment of rainforest in Sierra Leone.
Government and politics.
Sierra Leone is a constitutional republic with a directly elected president and a unicameral legislature. The current system of national government in Sierra Leone, established under the 1991 Constitution, is modeled on the following structure of government: the legislature, the executive and the judiciary. Within the confines of the 1991 Constitution, supreme legislative powers are vested in Parliament, which is the law-making body of the nation. Supreme executive authority rests in the President and members of his cabinet, and judicial power with the judiciary of which the Chief Justice is head. The President is the head of state, the head of government and the Commander-in-Chief of the Sierra Leone Armed Forces and the Sierra Leone Police. The President appoints and heads a cabinet of ministers, which must be approved by the Parliament. The President is elected by popular vote to a maximum of 2 5-year terms. The President is the highest and most influential position within the government of Sierra Leone. To be elected President of Sierra Leone, a candidate must gain at least 55% of the vote. If no candidate gets 55%, there is a second-round runoff between the top 2 candidates. The current President of Sierra Leone is Ernest Bai Koroma, who was sworn in on September 17, 2007. The first person of Tem ancestry to be elected president, he won a 10th runoff election, defeating incumbent Vice President, Solomon Barrow of the Sierra Leone People's Party, SLPP. Koroma was re-elected as president for his second and final term, on November 23, 2012, with 58.7%, in the 2012 Sierra Leone presidential election, defeating his main opponent, retired Brigadier Julius Moore Adebayo of the main opposition Sierra Leone People's Party, SLPP, who got 37.4%. Koroma was sworn in as president for his second and final term by Chief Justice Umhawa Tejan Jallow at State House in Freetown. The same day he was declared the winner of the election. Next to the president is the vice president, who is the second highest-ranking government official in the executive branch of the Sierra Leone government. As designated by the Sierra Leone Constitution, the vice president is to become the new president of Sierra Leone upon the death, resignation, or removal of the president by parliament, and to assume the presidency temporarily while the president is otherwise temporarily unable to fulfill his or her duties. The vice president is elected jointly with the president as his or her running mate. Sierra Leone's current vice president is Samuel Sam Sumena, sworn in on September 17, 2007. The Parliament of Sierra Leone is unicameral, with 124 seats. Each of the country's 14 districts is represented in Parliament. 112 members are elected concurrently with the presidential elections. The other 12 seats are filled by paramount chiefs from each of the country's 12 administrative districts. The current parliament in the August 2007 parliamentary elections is made up of 3 political parties. The most recent parliamentary elections were held on August 11, 2007. The All People's Congress, APC, won 59 of 112 parliamentary seats. The Sierra Leone People's Party, SLPP, won 43. And the People's Movement for Democratic Change, PMDC, 110. To be qualified as Member of Parliament, the person must be a citizen of Sierra Leone, must be at least 21 years old, must be able to speak, read and write the English language with a degree of proficiency to enable him to actively take part in proceedings in Parliament, and must not have any criminal conviction. Since independence in 1961, Sierra Leone's politics has been dominated by two major political parties, the SLPP and the ruling APC. Other minor political parties have also existed but with no significant support. The judicial power of Sierra Leone is vested in the judiciary, headed by the Chief Justice and comprising the Sierra Leone Supreme Court, which is the highest court in the country and its ruling therefore cannot be appealed. High Court of Justice, the Court of Appeal, the Magistrate Courts, and traditional courts in rural villages. The President appoints and Parliament approves justices for the three courts. The judiciary have jurisdiction in all civil and criminal matters throughout the country. The current Chief Justice is Yumhawa Tejenjello, who was appointed by President Ernest Bai Koroma and took office on January 25, 2008 upon her confirmation by Parliament. She is the first woman in the history of Sierra Leone to hold such position.
Foreign relations.
The Sierra Leone Ministry of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation, headed by Joseph Bandabla Dauda, is responsible for foreign policy of Sierra Leone. Sierra Leone has diplomatic relations that include China, Libya, Iran, and Cuba. Sierra Leone has good relations with the West, including the United States, and has maintained historical ties with the United Kingdom and other former British colonies through membership in the Commonwealth of Nations. The United Kingdom has played a major role in providing aid to the former colony, together with administrative help and military training since intervening to end the civil war in 2000. Former President Siaka Stevens' government had sought closer relations with other West African countries under the Economic Community of West African States, ECOWAS, a policy continued by the current government. Sierra Leone, along with Liberia and Guinea, form the Mano River Union, MRU. It is primarily designed to implement development projects and promote regional economic integration between the three countries. Sierra Leone is also a member of the United Nations and its specialized agencies, the African Union, the African Development Bank, AFDB, the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, OIC, and the Non-Aligned Movement, NAM. Sierra Leone is a member of the International Criminal Court with a bilateral immunity agreement of protection for the U.S. military, as covered under Article 98. The Office of National Security plays an important security coordination role. It helped protect the 2007 elections.
Provinces and districts.
The Republic of Sierra Leone is composed of 4 regions, the Northern Province, Southern Province, the Eastern Province, and the Western Area. The first 3 provinces are further divided into 12 districts. The districts are divided into 149 chiefdoms, which have traditionally been led by hereditary paramount chiefs, recognized by the British administration in 1896 at the time of organizing the Protectorate of Sierra Leone. Each chiefdom has ruling families that were recognized at that time. The tribal authority, made up of local notables, elects the paramount chief from the ruling families. Typically, chiefs have the power to raise taxes, control the judicial system, and allocate land, the most important resource in rural areas. The Sierra Leone legislature passed the Local Government Act 2004, which designated units of government called localities. To broaden representative government, each has a directly elected local district council to exercise authority and carry out functions at a local level. There are 13 district councils, 1 for each of the 12 districts and 1 for the Western Area Rural. 6 municipalities also have elected local councils: Freetown, Bo, Kenema, Koidu, and Makeni.
Economy.
Sierra Leone is slowly emerging from a protracted civil war and is showing signs of a successful transition. Investor and consumer confidence have continued to rise, adding impetus to the country's economic recovery. There is greater freedom of movement and the successful rehabilitation and resettlement of residential areas. Rich in minerals, Sierra Leone has relied on mining, especially diamonds, for its economic base. The country is among the top 10 diamond-producing nations. Mineral exports remain the main currency earner. Sierra Leone is a major producer of gem-quality diamonds. Though rich in diamonds, it has historically struggled to manage their exploitation and export. Annual production of Sierra Leone's diamond estimates range between $250 million minus $300 million. Some of it is smuggled, where it is possibly used for money laundering or financing illicit activities. Formal exports have dramatically improved since the Civil War, with efforts to improve the management of them having some success. In October 2000, a UN-approved certification system for exporting diamonds from the country was put in place and led to a dramatic increase in legal exports. In 2001, the government created a Mining Community Development Fund, DACDF, which returns a portion of diamond export taxes to diamond mining communities. The fund was created to raise local communities' stake in the legal diamond trade. Sierra Leone is also known for its blood diamonds that were mined and sold to diamond conglomerates during the Civil War, to buy the weapons that fueled its atrocities. In the 1970s and early 1980s, economic growth rate slowed because of a decline in the mining sector and increasing corruption among government officials. By the 1990s, economic activity was declining and economic infrastructure had become seriously degraded. Over the next decade, much of the formal economy was destroyed in the country's civil war. Since the end of hostilities in January 2002, massive infusions of outside assistance have helped Sierra Leone begin to recover. Much of the recovery will depend on the success of the government's efforts to limit corruption by officials, which many feel was the chief cause for the civil war. A key indicator of success will be the effectiveness of government management of its diamond sector. Sierra Leone has one of the world's largest deposits of rutile, a titanium ore used as paint pigment and welding rod coatings. Sierra Rutile Limited, owned by a consortium of United States and European investors, began commercial mining operations near the city of Beng, in the southern province, in early 1979. It was then the largest non-petroleum U.S. investment in West Africa. The export of 88,000 tons created $75 million in export earnings in 1990. In 1990, the company and the government made a new agreement on the terms of the company's concession in Sierra Leone. Rutile and bauxite mining operations were suspended when rebels invaded the mining sites in 1995, but exports resumed in 2005. The Tonkololai region hosts the biggest iron ore deposit in Africa and the third largest in the world, exploited by African Minerals, in the hills around Bumbuna, Mabonto and Bindugu. The new Mines and Minerals Act was passed by Parliament in November 2009, which aimed to improve concessions management in the Ministry of Mineral Resources. Sierra Leone is an Extractive Industries Transparency Initiative, EITI, candidate country. In January 2012, the government launched a GoSL online repository, which makes public all mining licenses and related payments recorded. About two-thirds of the population engages in subsistence agriculture, which accounts for 52.5% of national income. The government is trying to increase food and cash crop production and upgrade small farmers' skills. The government works with several foreign donors to operate integrated rural development and agricultural projects. Despite its successes in development, the Sierra Leone economy still faces significant challenges. There is high unemployment, particularly among the youth and ex-combatants. Authorities have been slow to implement reforms in the civil service, and the pace of the privatization program is also slacking, and donors have urged its advancement. The currency is the Leone. The central bank of the country is the Bank of Sierra Leone, which is in the capital, Freetown. The country operates a floating exchange rate system, and foreign currencies can be exchanged at any of the commercial banks, recognized foreign exchange bureau and most hotels. Credit card use is limited in Sierra Leone, though they may be used at some hotels and restaurants. There are a few internationally linked automated teller machines that accept Visa cards in Freetown operated by Pro Credit Bank.
Demographics.
In 2013, Sierra Leone has an officially projected population of 6,190,280 and a growth rate of 2.216% a year. The country's population is mostly young, with an estimated 41.7% under 15, and rural, with an estimated 62% of people living outside the cities. As a result of migration to cities, the population is becoming more urban with an estimated rate of urbanization growth of 2.9% a year. Population density varies greatly within the country. The Western Area Urban District, including Freetown, the capital and largest city, has a population density of 1,224 persons per square kilometer. The largest district geographically, Koinadugu, has a much lower density of 21.4 persons per square kilometer. English is the official language, spoken at schools, government administration and the media, but Creole, derived from English and several indigenous African languages, and the language of the Sierra Leone Creole people, is the most widely spoken language in virtually all parts of Sierra Leone. As the Creole language is spoken by 90% of the country's population, it unites all the different ethnic groups, especially in their trade and interaction with each other. According to the World Refugee Survey 2008, published by the U.S. Committee for Refugees and Immigrants, Sierra Leone had a population of 8,700 refugees and asylum seekers at the end of 2007. Nearly 20,000 Liberian refugees voluntarily returned to Liberia over the course of 2007. Of the refugees remaining in Sierra Leone, nearly all were Liberian. The populations quoted above for the 5 largest cities are from the 2004 census. Other figures are estimates from the source cited. Different sources give different estimates. Some claim that Magburaka should be included in the above list, but there is considerable difference among sources. One source estimates the population at 14,915, whilst another puts it as high as 85,313. Pandbutokpombu is presumably the extended town of Togbonbu, which had a population of 10,716 in the 2004 census. Kbandembu had a larger population of 12,139 in that census. In the 2004 census, Waterloo had a population of 34,079.
Religion.
A high proportion of the population of Sierra Leone are Muslims, while Christians form a significant minority. The Pew Research Center reports the 2004 census figure for the Muslim population at 71.3%, 4,059,000. The U.S. State Department estimated that Muslims comprised 60% of Sierra Leone's population as of 2007. 20 to 30% are reported to be followers of Christianity, and 5 to 10% of the population practice indigenous animist beliefs. The 2007 UNHCR's report on international religious freedom in Sierra Leone estimated 60% Muslim, 20 to 30% Christian, and 5 to 10% other beliefs. In addition, many citizens practice a syncretic mixture of Islam and traditional indigenous religious beliefs, or Christianity and traditional indigenous beliefs. Muslims predominate in all of the country's 3 provinces and the western area. In earlier decades, they were concentrated in the north with the south being mainly Christian. The majority of Sierra Leone's ethnic groups are predominantly Muslim. The vast majority of Sierra Leonean Muslims are Sunni. Other significant Islamic sects in the country are Shia, Ahmadiyya and non-denominational Muslims. Most mosques in Sierra Leone are non-denominational. The largest mosque in Sierra Leone is the Freetown Central Mosque. It is non-denominational and located in the capital. The chief imam of the Freetown Central Mosque is Sheikh Ahmad Tajan Silla, a Shia Muslim, who is also the spiritual leader of the Sierra Leone United Council of Imams. This is an Islamic organisation made up of imams from across Sierra Leone. The head of the Ahmadiyya branch of Islam in Sierra Leone is Sheikh Movi Sadler Rahman. The vast majority of Sierra Leonean Christians are Protestants, of which the largest group are Methodists and Evangelicals. Other Christian Protestants denominations in the country include Presbyterian, Baptist, Seventh-day Adventist Anglicans, Lutheran and Pentecostals. Non-denominational Christians form a significant minority of Sierra Leone's Christian population. Catholics are the largest group of non-Protestant Christians in Sierra Leone, and they form about 5% of the country's population. The Roman Catholic Church in Sierra Leone is headed by the Diocese of Freetown, who is currently Archbishop Edward Tamba Charles. The Jehovah's Witnesses and Mormons form a small minority of the Christian population in Sierra Leone. A small community of Orthodox Christians reside in the capital Freetown. Muslims and Christians collaborate and interact with each peacefully. Religious violence is very rare in the country. The Constitution of Sierra Leone provides for freedom of religion. The country is home to the Sierra Leone Interreligious Council, which is made up of both Christian and Muslim religious leaders to promote peace and tolerance throughout the country.
Ethnic groups.
Sierra Leone is home to about 16 ethnic groups, each with its own language. The largest and most influential are the Tem at about 35%, and the Mende at about 31%. The Tem predominate in the northern Sierra Leone and the areas around the capital of Sierra Leone. The Mende predominate in southeastern Sierra Leone, with the exception of Kono district. The vast majority of Tem are Muslims. The Mende are also predominantly Muslims but with a large Christian minority. Sierra Leone's national politics centers on the competition between the northwest, dominated by the Tem, and the southeast dominated by the Mende. The Mende, who are believed to be descendants of the Maine, originally occupied the Liberian hinterland. They began moving into Sierra Leone slowly and peacefully in the 18th century. The Tem are thought to have come from Fouta Djallon, which is in present-day Guinea. Sierra Leone's current president Ernest Bai Koroma is the first ethnic Tem to be elected to the office. The third largest ethnic group are the Limba at about 8% of the population. The Limba are native people of Sierra Leone. They have no tradition of origin, and it is believed that they have lived in Sierra Leone since before the European encounter. The Limba are primarily found in northern Sierra Leone, particularly in Bombali, Cambia and Koinadouga district. The Limba are about equally divided between Muslims and Christians. The Limba are close political allies of the neighboring Tem. Since independence, the Limba have traditionally been very influential in Sierra Leone's politics, along with the Mende. The vast majority of Limba support the All People's Congress, APC, political party. Sierra Leone's first and second presidents, Siaka Stevens and Joseph Saidu Momoh, respectively, were both ethnic Limba. Sierra Leone's current defense minister Alfred Paulo Conti is an ethnic Limba. The fourth largest ethnic group are the Fula at around 7% of the population. Descendants of 17th and 18th century Fulani migrant settlers from the Fouta Djallon region of Guinea, they live primarily in the northeast and the western area of Sierra Leone. The Fula are virtually all Muslims. The Fula are primarily traders, and many live in middle-class homes. Because of their trading, the Fulas are found in nearly all parts of the country. The other ethnic groups are the Mandingo, also known as Mandinka. They are descendants of traders from Guinea who migrated to Sierra Leone during the late 19th to mid-20th centuries. The Mandinka are predominantly found in the east and the northern part of the country. They predominate in the large towns, most notably Karina, in Bombali district in the north. Kabul and Falaba in Koinadouga district in the north. And Yenjima, Kono district in the east of the country. Like the Fula, the Mandinka are virtually all Muslims. Sierra Leone's third president Ahmad Tejan Kabar is an ethnic Mandingo. Next in proportion are the Kono, who live primarily in Kono district in eastern Sierra Leone. The Kono are descendants of migrants from Guinea. Today their workers are known primarily as diamond miners. The majority of the Kono ethnic group are Christians, though with an influential Muslim minority. Sierra Leone's current Vice President Alhaji Samuel Sam Sumena is an ethnic Kono. The small but significant Creole people, descendants of freed African American, West Indian and liberated African slaves who settled in Freetown between 1787 and about 1885, make up about 3% of the population. They primarily occupy the capital city of Freetown and its surrounding western area. Creole culture reflects the Western culture and ideals within which many of their ancestors originated. They also had close ties with British officials and colonial administration during years of development. The Creole have traditionally dominated Sierra Leone's judiciary and Freetown's elected city council. One of the first ethnic groups to become educated according to Western traditions, they have traditionally been appointed to positions in the civil service, beginning during the colonial years. They continue to be influential in the civil service. The vast majority of Creoles are Christians, though with a significant Muslim minority, known as the Oku people. Other minority ethnic groups are the Kuranko, who are related to the Mandingo, and are largely Muslims. The Kuranko are believed to have begun arriving in Sierra Leone from Guinea in about 1600 and settled in the north, particularly in Koinadouga district. The Kuranko are primarily farmers. Leaders among them have traditionally held several senior positions in the military. Sierra Leone current Finance Minister Kefla Mara is an ethnic Kuranko. The Loko in the north are native people of Sierra Leone, believed to have lived in Sierra Leone since the time of European encounter. Like the neighboring Tem, the Loko are Muslim majority. The Sisu and their related Yalanka are traders. Both groups are primarily found in the far north in Cambia and Koinadouga district close to the border with Guinea. The Sisu and Yalanka are both descendants of migrants from Guinea. They are virtually all Muslims. The Kissi live further inland in southeastern Sierra Leone. They predominate in the large town of Koindu and its surrounding areas in Kalan district. The vast majority of Kissi are Christians. The much smaller Viankra peoples are primarily found in Kalan and Puchon districts near the border with Liberia. The Kra predominate in the Kru Bay neighborhood in the capital Freetown. The Via are largely Muslim, while the Kra are largely Christian. On the coast in Mbang district in the south are the Shibro. Native to Sierra Leone, they have occupied Shibro Island since it was founded. The Shibro are primarily fishermen and farmers, and they are predominantly found in Mbang district. The Shibro are virtually all Christians, and their paramount chiefs had a history of intermarriage with British colonists and traders. A small number of Sierra Leoneans are of partial or full Lebanese ancestry, descendants of traders who first came to the nation in the 19th century. They are locally known as Sierra Leonean Lebanese. The Sierra Leonean Lebanese community are primarily traders and they mostly live in middle-class households in the urban areas, primarily in Freetown, Bo, Kenema, Koidu Town and Makeni.
Education.
Education in Sierra Leone is legally required for all children for 6 years at primary level, Class P1 P6, and 3 years in junior secondary education, but a shortage of schools and teachers has made implementation impossible. 2/3 of the adult population of the country are illiterate. The Sierra Leone Civil War resulted in the destruction of 1,270 primary schools, and in 2001, 67% of all school-age children were out of school. The situation has improved considerably since then, with primary school enrollment doubling between 2001 and 2005 and the reconstruction of many schools since the end of the war. Students at primary schools are usually 6 to 12 years old, and in secondary schools 13 to 18. Primary education is free and compulsory in government-sponsored public schools. The country has 3 universities: Fura Bay College, founded in 1827, the oldest university in West Africa; University of Makeni, established initially in September 2005 as the Fatima Institute. The college was granted university status in August 2009, and assumed the name University of Makeni, or UNIMAC, and NJALA University, primarily located in Bo District. NJALA University was established as the NJALA Agricultural Experimental Station in 1910 and became a university in 2005. Teacher training colleges and religious seminaries are found in many parts of the country.
Media.
Media in Sierra Leone began with the introduction of the first printing press in Africa at the start of the 19th century. A strong free journalistic tradition developed with the creation of a number of newspapers. In the 1860s, the country became a journalist hub for Africa, with professionals traveling to the country from across the continent. At the end of the 19th century, the industry went into decline, and when radio was introduced in the 1930s, it became the primary communication media in the country. The Sierra Leone Broadcasting Service, SLBS, was created by the colonial government in 1934, making it the earliest English-language radio broadcaster service in West Africa. The service began broadcasting television in 1963, with coverage extended to all the districts in the country in 1978. In April 2010, the SLBS merged with a United Nations peacekeeping radio station in Sierra Leone to form the Sierra Leone Broadcasting Corporation, the government-owned current national broadcaster in Sierra Leone. The Sierra Leone Constitution guarantees freedom of speech, and freedom of the press. However, the government maintains strong control of media, and at times restricts these rights in practice. Some subjects are seen as taboo by society and members of the political elite. Imprisonment and violence have been used by the political establishment against journalists. Under legislation enacted in 1980, all newspapers must register with the Ministry of Information and pay sizable registration fees. The criminal libel law, including seditious libel law of 1965, is used to control what is published in the media. In 2006, President Ahmad Tejan Kabar committed to reforming the laws governing the press and media to create a freer system for journalists to work in. As of 2013, Sierra Leone is ranked 61st, up 2 slots from 63rd in 2012, out of 179 countries on Reporters Without Borders Press Freedom Index. Print media is not widely read in Sierra Leone, especially outside Freetown and other major cities, partially due to the low levels of literacy in the country. In 2007 there were 15 daily newspapers in the country, as well as those published weekly. Among newspaper readership, young people are likely to read newspapers weekly and older people daily. The majority of newspapers are privately run and are often critical of the government. The standard of print journalism tends to be low due to lack of training, and people trust the information published in newspapers less than that found on the radio. Radio is the most popular and most trusted media in Sierra Leone, with 85% of people having access to a radio and 72% of people in the country listening to the radio daily. These levels do vary between areas of the country, with the western area having the highest levels and Kalen the lowest. Stations mainly consist of local commercial stations with a limited broadcast range, combined with a few stations with national coverage, Capital Radio Sierra Leone being the largest of the commercial stations. The United Nations Mission in Sierra Leone, UNIOSIL, ran one of the most popular stations in the country, broadcasting programs in a range of languages. The Union Mission were restructured in 2008 and it was decided that the UN radio would be merged with SLBS to form the new Sierra Leone Broadcasting Corporation, SLBC. This merger eventually happened in 2011 after the necessary legislation was enacted. SLBC transmits radio on FM and has 2 television services, one of which is uplinked by satellite for international consumption. FM relays of BBC World Service, Radio France Internationale and Voice of America are also broadcast. Outside the capital Freetown and other major cities, television is not watched by a great many people, although Bo, Kenema and Makeni are served by their own relays of the main SLBC service. There are 2 national, free terrestrial television stations in Sierra Leone, one run by the government SLBC and the other a private station, AIT, Africa Independent Television, which is linked with the Nigerian station of the same name. In 2007, A pay-per-view service was also introduced by GTV as part of a Pan-African television service in addition to the 9-year-old Sub-Saharan Digital Satellite Television Service, DSTV, originating from MultiChoice Africa in South Africa. GTV subsequently went out of business, leaving DSTV as the only provider of pay-per-view television in the country. Internet access in Sierra Leone has been sparse but is on the increase, especially since the introduction of 3G cellular phone services across the country. There are 3 main Internet service providers, ISPs, operating in the country. Freetown has Internet cafes and other businesses offering Internet access. Problems experienced with access to the Internet include an intermittent electricity supply and a slow connection speed in the country outside Freetown.
Health.
Healthcare is provided by the government and others. Since April 2010, the government has instituted the Free Healthcare Initiative, which commits to free services for pregnant and lactating women and children under 5. This policy has been supported by increased aid from the United Kingdom and is recognized as a progressive move that other African countries may follow. Few people in Sierra Leone have regular access to adequate medical care. For some people from rural areas, the next doctor or hospital is out of reach although free healthcare might be provided there. In other cases, people are charged by the medical staff who are themselves poorly paid. Many people do not know that they have a right for free medical care. Life expectancy at birth is estimated to be 56.55 years in 2012. Estimates for infant mortality in Sierra Leone are among the highest in the world. For every 1,000 live births, approximately 77 children do not survive to their first birthday. The maternal death rates are also among the highest in the world, at 890 deaths per 100,000 live births. The country suffers from epidemic outbreaks of diseases, including yellow fever, cholera, Lassa fever and meningitis. The prevalence of HIV/AIDS in the population is 1.6%. Higher than the world average of 1% but lower than the average of 6.1% across sub-Saharan Africa. During the Civil War, 1991 to 2002, many soldiers took part in atrocities and many children were forced to fight. This left them traumatized, with an estimated 400,000 people, by 2009, being mentally ill. Thousands of former child soldiers have fallen into substance abuse as they try to blunt their memories. Mental health care is still not a service offered in the country 5 years after the Civil War ended in 2002. Mental health care in the country is almost non-existing. Many sufferers try to cure themselves with the help of traditional healers, some of whose practices can be useful.
Military.
The military of Sierra Leone, officially the Republic of Sierra Leone Armed Forces, RSLAF, are the unified armed forces of Sierra Leone responsible for the territorial security of Sierra Leone's border and defending the national interests of Sierra Leone within the framework of its international obligations. The armed forces were formed after independence in 1961, on the basis of elements of the former British Royal West African Frontier Force present in the country. The Sierra Leone Armed Forces consists of around 15,500 personnel, comprising the largest Sierra Leone Army, the Sierra Leone Navy and the Sierra Leone Air Wing. The President of Sierra Leone is the Commander-in-Chief of the military, with the Minister of Defense responsible for defense policy and the formulation of the armed forces. The current Sierra Leone Defense Minister is retired Major Alfred Paulo Conti. The military of Sierra Leone also has a Chief of the Defense Staff who is a uniformed military official responsible for the administration and the operational control of the Sierra Leone military. Brigadier General Alfred Nelson Williams, who was appointed by President Koroma, succeeded the retired Major General Edward Samboma on September 12, 2008 as the Chief of Defense Staff of the military. Before Sierra Leone gained independence in 1961, the military was known as the Royal Sierra Leone Military Force. The military seized control in 1968, bringing the National Reformation Council into power. On April 19, 1971, when Sierra Leone became a republic, The Royal Sierra Leone Military Forces were renamed the Republic of Sierra Leone Military Force, RSLMF. The RSLMF remained a single-service organization until 1979, when the Sierra Leone Navy was established. In 1995 Defense Headquarters was established, and the Sierra Leone Air Wing formed. The RSLMF was renamed as the Armed Forces of the Republic of Sierra Leone, AFRSL.
Law enforcement.
Law enforcement in Sierra Leone is primarily the responsibility of the Sierra Leone Police, SLP. Sierra Leone Police was established by the British colony in 1894. It is one of the oldest police forces in West Africa. It works to prevent crime, protect life and property, detect and prosecute offenders, maintain public order, ensure safety and security, and enhance access to justice. The Sierra Leone Police is headed by the Inspector General of Police, the professional head of the Sierra Leone Police Force, who is appointed by the President of Sierra Leone. Each one of Sierra Leone's 14 districts is headed by a district police commissioner who is the professional head of their respective district. These police commissioners report directly to the Inspector General of Police at the Sierra Leone Police Headquarters in Freetown. The current Inspector General of Police is Brima Akakamara, who was appointed to the position by former President Ahmad Tejan Kabar.
Transportation.
There are a number of systems of transport in Sierra Leone, which has a road, air and water infrastructure, including a network of highways and several airports. There are 11,300 kilometers of highways in Sierra Leone, of which 904 kilometers, 562 miles, are paved, about 8% of the roads. Sierra Leone highways are linked to Conakry, Guinea, and Monrovia, Liberia. Sierra Leone has the largest natural harbor on the African continent, allowing international shipping through the Queen Elizabeth II Quay in the Clinttown area of eastern Freetown or through Government Wharf in central Freetown. There are 800 kilometers, 497 miles, of waterways in Sierra Leone, of which 600 kilometers, 373 miles, are navigable year-round. Major port cities are Bang, Freetown, Shibro Island and Pipel. There are 10 regional airports in Sierra Leone, and one international airport. The Lungi International Airport located in the coastal town of Lungi in northern Sierra Leone is the primary airport for domestic and international travel to or from Sierra Leone. Passengers cross the river to Aberdeen heliports in Freetown by hovercraft, ferry or a helicopter. Helicopters are also available from the airport to other major cities in the country. The airport has paved runways longer than 3,047 m. The other airports have unpaved runways, and 7 have runways 914 to 1,523 meters long. The remaining 2 have shorter runways. This country appears on the EU list of prohibited countries with regard to the certification of airlines. This means that no airline which is Sierra Leone registered may operate services of any kind within the European Union. This is due to substandard safety standards.
Drinking water supply.
Water supply in Sierra Leone is characterized by limited access to safe drinking water. Despite efforts by the government and numerous non-governmental organizations, access has not much improved since the end of the Sierra Leone Civil War in 2002, stagnating at about 50% and even declining in rural areas. It is hoped that a new dam in Origu, for which China committed financing in 2009, will alleviate water scarcity. According to a national survey, multiple indicator cluster survey, carried out in 2006, 84% of the urban population and 32% of the rural population had access to an improved water source. Those with access in rural areas were served almost exclusively by protected wells. The 68% of the rural population without access to an improved water source relied on surface water, 50%, unprotected wells, 9% and unprotected springs, 9%. Only 20% of the urban population and 1% of the rural population had access to piped drinking water in their home. Compared to the 2000 survey, access has increased in urban areas, but has declined in rural areas, possibly because facilities have broken down because of a lack of maintenance. With a new decentralization policy, embodied in the Local Government Act of 2004, responsibility for water supply in areas outside the capital was passed from the central government to local councils. In Freetown, the Guma Valley Water Company remains in charge of water supply.
Food and customs.
Rice is the staple food of Sierra Leone and is consumed at virtually every meal daily. The rice is prepared in numerous ways, and topped with a variety of sauces made from some of Sierra Leone's favorite toppings, including potato leaves, cassava leaves, crane, okra soup, fried fish and groundnut stew. Along the street of towns and cities one can find foods consisting of fruit, vegetables and snacks such as fresh mangoes, oranges, pineapple, fried plantains, ginger beer, fried potato, fried cassava with pepper sauce. Small bags of popcorn or peanuts, bread, roasted corn, or skewers of grilled meat or shrimp. Pollo is a popular Sierra Leonean drink. It is a sweet, lightly fermented palm wine, and is found in bars in towns and villages across the country. Pollo bars are areas of lively informal debate about politics, football, entertainment and other issues.
Culture. Arts.
The arts in Sierra Leone are a mixture of tradition and hybrid African and Western styles.
Sports.
Football is by far the most popular sport in Sierra Leone. Children, youth and adult are frequently seen playing street football across Sierra Leone. There are organized youth and adult football tournaments across the country, and there are various primary and secondary schools with football teams across Sierra Leone. The Sierra Leone national football team, popularly known as the Leone Stars, represents the country in international competitions. It has never qualified for the FIFA World Cup but participated in the 1994 and 1996 African Cup of Nations. When the national football team, the Leone Stars, have a match, Sierra Leoneans across the country come together united in support of the national team and people rush to their local radio and television stations to follow the live match. The country's national television network, the Sierra Leone Broadcasting Corporation, SLBC, broadcasts the national football team live match, along with many local radio stations across the country. When the Leone Stars win an important match, many youth across the county rush to the street to celebrate. Many of the Sierra Leone national team footballers play for teams based in Europe, although virtually all of them started professional football in the Sierra Leone National Premier League. Many of the national team footballers are celebrities across Sierra Leone and they are often well known by most of the country's general population. Some well-known Sierra Leonean international footballers include Mohamed Kallan, Mohamed Bangara, Rodney Strasser, Ibrahim Tite Bangara, Alassane Bangara, Sheriff Suma, Mohamed Kamara, Amara Bangara, Julius Woba, Kari Kamara and Mido Kamara. The Sierra Leone National Premier League is the top professional football league in Sierra Leone and is controlled by the Sierra Leone Football Association. 14 clubs from across the country compete in the Sierra Leone Premier League. The two biggest and most successful football clubs are East End Lions and Mighty Blackpool. East End Lions and Mighty Blackpool have an intense rivalry, and when they play each other the National Stadium in Freetown is often sold out and supporters of both clubs often clash with each other before and after the game. There is a huge police presence inside and outside the National Stadium during a match between the two great rivals to prevent a clash. Many Sierra Leonean youth follow the local football league. Many Sierra Leonean youth, children and adults follow the major football leagues in Europe, particularly the English Premier League, Italian Serie A, Spanish La Liga, German Bundesliga and French Ligue 1. The Sierra Leone cricket team represents Sierra Leone in international cricket competitions, and is among the best in West Africa. It became an affiliate member of the International Cricket Council in 2002. It made its international debut at the 2004 African Affiliates Championship, where it finished last of 8 teams. but at the equivalent tournament in 2006, Division 3 of the African region of the World Cricket League, it finished as runner-up to Mozambique, and just missed a promotion to Division 2. In 2009 the Sierra Leone Under-19 team finished second in the African Under-19 Championship in Zambia, thus qualifying for the Under-19 World Cup qualifying tournament with 9 other teams. However, the team was unable to obtain Canadian visas to play in the tournament, which was held in Toronto. Basketball is not a very popular sport in Sierra Leone. The Sierra Leone national basketball team represents Sierra Leone in international men's basketball competitions and is controlled by the Sierra Leone Basketball Federation. The National Basketball Association, NBA, is popular among a small portion of the youth population. NBA superstars LeBron James, Kobe Bryant and Kevin Durant are popular among Sierra Leone's youthful population. Former NBA stars, in particular Michael Jordan, Shaquille O'Neal, Allen Iverson and Magic Johnson are popular in the country. Michael Jordan in particular is the most famous basketball player in the country and he is very popular among the general population. Current NBA youngstar Victor Oladipo is of Sierra Leonean descent, as his father is a native of Sierra Leone. In the 1790s, the settlers, including adult women, voted for the first time in elections. The Sierra Leone Company, controlled by London investors, refused to allow the settlers to take freehold of the land. In 1799 some of the settlers revolted. The Crown subdued the revolt by bringing in forces of more than 500 Jamaican Maroon people, whom they transported from Trelawney Town via Nova Scotia in 1800. On January 1, 1808, Thomas Ludlam, the governor of the Sierra Leone Company and a leading abolitionist, surrendered the company's charter. This ended its 16 years of running the colony. The British Crown reorganized the Sierra Leone Company as the African Institution. It was directed to improve the local economy. Its members represented both British who hoped to inspire local entrepreneurs and those with interest in the Macaulay and Babington Company, which held the British monopoly on Sierra Leone trade. Beginning in 1808, following the abolition of the slave trade in 1807, British crews delivered thousands of formerly enslaved Africans to Freetown, after liberating them from illegal slave ships. Most of these liberated Africans or captives chose to remain in Sierra Leone. Cut off from their various homelands and traditions, the liberated Africans assimilated the Western styles of settlers and Maroons. They built a flourishing trade in flowers and beads on the West African coast. These returned Africans were from many areas of Africa, but principally the West Coast. During the 19th century, freed black Americans, some Americo-Liberian refugees, and particularly West Indians, also immigrated and settled in Freetown. Together these peoples created a new Creole ethnicity called the Creole people, initially called Creoles, and a trading language, Creole, which became commonly used among many of the ethnicities in the country.
Colonial era.
In the early 19th century, Freetown served as the residence of the British colonial governor of the region, who also ministered over the Gold Coast, now Ghana, and the Gambia settlements. Sierra Leone developed as the educational centre of British West Africa. The British established Fura Bay College here in 1827, which rapidly became a magnet for English-speaking Africans on the West Coast. For more than a century, it was the only European-style university in Western Sub-Saharan Africa. The British interacted mostly with the Creoles in Freetown. They did most of the trading with the indigenous peoples of the interior. In addition, educated Creoles held numerous positions in the colonial government, giving them status and good-paying positions. Following the Berlin Conference of 1884 to 1862, the Portuguese explorer Pedro de Sintra visited this area, naming it Serra Leão, meaning Lioness Mountains, for the landscape around Freetown. Posts in Sierra Leone were developed as centers of the Atlantic slave trade, and hundreds of thousands of Africans were transported from the interior to the Americas through trading posts in Sierra Leone. In the late 18th century, the British Crown established a colony at Freetown, for resettlements of freed slaves. About 1,200 black loyalists were resettled from Nova Scotia on March 11, 1792. They were mostly African Americans from the former colonies, now the United States. Slaves liberated from illegal trade in the early 19th century joined them, and they developed the Creole people and language. In 1808, Freetown became a British Crown colony. In 1896, Britain annexed the interior of the country as a British protectorate, changing its relations with the paramount chiefs. The united country achieved independence in 1961. Competition among rival groups finally opened into the Sierra Leone Civil War, 1991 to 2002, which over more than a decade devastated the country. It left more than 50,000 people dead, much of the country's infrastructure destroyed, and over 2 million people displaced as refugees in neighboring countries.
History. Early history.
Archaeological finds show that Sierra Leone has been inhabited continuously for at least 2,500 years, populated by successive cultures of peoples who migrated from other parts of Africa. The people adopted the use of iron by the 9th century, and by 1000 AD agriculture was being practiced by coastal tribes. The climate changed considerably during that time, and boundaries among different ecological zones changed as well, affecting migration and conquest. Sierra Leone's dense tropical rainforest and swampy environment was considered impenetrable. It was also host to the tsetse fly, which carried disease fatal to horses and zebu cattle used by the Man people. This environmental factor protected its peoples from conquest by the Man and other African empires. This also reduced the Islamic influence of the Mali Empire. But, the Islamic faith, introduced by Siasu traders, merchants and migrants from the north and east, became widely adopted in the 18th century.
European traders.
European contacts within Sierra Leone were among the first in West Africa. In 1462, Portuguese explorer Pedro de Sintra mapped the hills surrounding what is now Freetown Harbour, naming the shaped formation Serra de Lai, Portuguese for Lioness Mountains. The Italian rendering of this geographic formation is Sierra Leone, which later was used as the country's name. Soon after, Portuguese traders arrived at the harbour. By 1495 they had built a fortified trading post. The Dutch and French also set up trade here, and each nation used Sierra Leone as a trading point for slaves brought by African traders from interior areas. In 1562, the English initiated the Triangle trade when Sir John Hawkins transported 300 enslaved Africans, acquired by the sword and partly by other means, to the Spanish colony of Santo Domingo in the Caribbean, where he sold them.
Early colonies.
Following the American Revolutionary War, the British had evacuated thousands of freed African American slaves and resettled them in Canadian and Caribbean colonies and London. Many struggled in their new lives. In 1787 the British Crown founded a settlement in Sierra Leone in what was called the Province of Freedom. It intended to resettle some of the black poor of London, mostly African Americans freed by the British during the war. About 400 blacks and 60 whites reached Sierra Leone on May 15, 1787. The group also included some West Indian, African and East Asian people from London. After they established Granville Town, most of the first group of colonists died, due to disease and warfare with the indigenous African peoples, Tem and Mende, who resisted their encroachment. The 64 remaining colonists established a second Granville Town. Following the Revolution, more than 3,000 black loyalists had also been settled in Nova Scotia, where they were finally granted land. They founded Birchtown, Nova Scotia, but faced harsh winters and racial discrimination in the colony. Thomas Peters pressed British authorities for relief and more aid. Together with British abolitionist John Clarkson, the Sierra Leone Company was established to relocate black loyalists who wanted to take their chances in West Africa. In 1792 nearly 1,200 persons from Nova Scotia crossed the Atlantic to build the second, and only permanent, colony of Sierra Leone and the settlement of Freetown on March 11, 1792. In Sierra Leone they were called the Nova Scotian settlers, the Nova Scotians, or the settlers. The settlers built Freetown in the styles they knew from their lives in the American South. They also continued American fashion and American manners. In addition, many continued to practice Methodism in Freetown. The initial process of society building in Freetown, however, was a harsh struggle. The Crown did not supply enough basic supplies and provisions, and the settlers were continually threatened by illegal slave trading and the risk of re-enslavement. 5. The UK decided that it needed to establish more dominion over the inland areas, in order to satisfy what was described by the European powers as effective occupation of territories. In 1896 it annexed these areas, declaring them the Sierra Leone Protectorate. With this change, the British began to expand their administration in the region, recruiting British citizens to posts, and pushing Creoles out of positions in government and even the desirable residential areas in Freetown. In addition, the British annexation of the Protectorate interfered with the sovereignty of indigenous chiefs. They designated chiefs as units of local government, rather than dealing with them individually as had been previous practice. They did not maintain relationships even with longtime allies, such as Biburi, chief of Cassi, a community on the small Scarces River. He was later unfairly portrayed as a prime instigator of the Hut Tax War in 1898. Colonel Frederick Cardew, military governor of the Protectorate, in 1898 established a new tax on dwellings and demanded that the chiefs use their peoples to maintain roads. The taxes were often higher than the value of the dwellings, and 24 chiefs signed a petition to Cardew, telling how destructive this was. Their people could not afford to take time off from their subsistence agriculture. They resisted payment of taxes. Tensions over the new colonial requirements, and administration suspicions about the chiefs, led to the Hut Tax War of 1898, also called the 10-Mend War. The British fired first. The Northern Front of majority 10 people was led by Biburi. The Southern Front, consisting mostly of men people, entered conflict somewhat later and for different reasons. For several months, Buri's fighters had the advantage over the vastly more powerful British forces. Both the British troops and Buri's warriors suffered hundreds of fatalities each. Biburi finally surrendered on November 11, 1898 to end the destruction of his people's territory and dwellings. Although the British government recommended leniency, Cardew insisted on sending the chief and 2 allies into exile in the Gold Coast. His government hanged 96 of the chief's warriors. Biburi was allowed to return in 1905, when he resumed his chieftaincy of Cassi. The defeat of the 10-Mend in the Hut Tax War ended large-scale organized resistance to the Protectorate and colonial government. But, resistance continued throughout the colonial period in the form of intermittent, wide-scale rioting and chaotic labor disturbances. For instance, riots in 1955 and 1956 involved many tens of thousands of natives in the Protectorate. Domestic slavery, which continued.
Sierra Leone.
Sierra Leone, officially the Republic of Sierra Leone, is a country in West Africa that is bordered by Guinea to the northeast, Liberia to the southeast, and the Atlantic Ocean to the southwest. Sierra Leone is a constitutional republic with a directly elected president and a unicameral legislature. The country has a tropical climate, with a diverse environment ranging from savanna to rainforests. The country covers a total area of 71,740 kilometers and with an estimated population of 6 million. Sierra Leone is divided into 4 administrative regions: the Northern Province, Eastern Province, Southern Province and the Western Area, which are subdivided into 14 districts. Each district has its own directly elected local government known as District Council, headed by a council chairman, in whom local executive authority is vested. Freetown is Sierra Leone's capital, its largest city as well as its economic, commercial and political center. Bo is Sierra Leone's second largest city and second major economic center. Since independence to present, Sierra Leone's politics has been dominated by 2 major political parties, the Sierra Leone People's Party, SLPP, and the All People's Congress, APC. The population of Sierra Leone is comprised of about 16 ethnic groups, each with its own language and custom. The two largest and most influential are the Tem and the Mende. The Tem are predominantly found in the north of the country, while the Mende are predominant in the southeast. Sierra Leone is a predominantly Muslim country, though with an influential Christian minority. Sierra Leone is regarded as one of the most religiously tolerant countries in the world. Muslims and Christians collaborate and interact with each other peacefully in the country. Religious violence is very rare in Sierra Leone. Although English is the language of instruction in schools and the official language in government administration, the Creole language, derived from English and several indigenous African languages, is the primary language of communication among Sierra Leone's different ethnic groups, and is spoken by 90% of the country's population. The Creole language serves to unite the different ethnic groups, especially in their trade and daily interaction with each other. Sierra Leone has relied on mining, especially diamonds, for its economic base. It is also among the largest producers of titanium and bauxite, a major producer of gold, and is one of the world's largest deposits of rutile. Sierra Leone is home to the third largest natural harbor in the world. Despite exploitation of this natural wealth, 70% of his people live in poverty. In 14